It's been more than 6 months. During the summer of 2020, since an incident took place in our area that quickly thrust a small New Jersey township into the national, even international spotlight.
The people were upset by what happened. I mean, I was upset by what happened.
It's a learning experience. Let's take it, move, learn from it. How do we better ourselves?
We keep ignoring the things that have always got us here, will always be like the past. And so it's up to us to try to create a better future.
In the middle of global protests inspired by the death of George Floyd, a group of young people decided to have their own march. But it wasn't the march that had everyone talking, it was the response of some along the march route.
I mean, it's hard to see people like carry so much hate.
How could somebody be so cruel that you hear someone saying, I can't breathe?
Franklinville, New Jersey became known as an example of racism across our country. But the actual residents that we spoke to then were divided on whether or not that label was ever fair.
They're going to constantly say, that's not what Franklinville is, what you saw, but that is indeed what Franklinville is.
It happened. It's an ugly incident. Not proud of it. Wished it never happened here. But it did, and we're going to deal with it.
There was no need for any of that to occur and for them to go through that.
If we want that not to be our story, that we need to come to the table loudly and say that is not our story.
So even as people talked about the challenges here in Franklinville, they repeatedly asked us to not just label them and never come back like so many others did. They said that they were committed to change, to having the difficult discussions, and to trying to progress. So did they? And are they an example for the rest of us? This is Franklinville, small town America revisited. What's changed?
The weather, the season. That's about it.
Really?
As far as Franklinville,
Yeah.
I've seen no change.
Is anything changing?
It is changing.
Yeah.
They formed a committee, and we meet once a month
Yeah.
and go over, and they take ideas, so they're changing. Before that wasn't possible. You didn't go up there and meet. Now we have some people in the township that can make a change.
I think that there is still a lot in the dark. I would never say that we are anywhere near complete on the work we need to do. We've just started scratching the surface.
This time we checked in again with the local pastor, the mayor, the chief of police, and community activists that we spoke with before, and added in several members of a unity coalition that stepped to the forefront to add a fresh perspective.
I just felt bad that they had to experience something like that in this day and time.
The Aikens run a community center in nearby Newfield and have long been champions of local youth.
Grew up in that neighborhood,
Okay.
very closely to that neighborhood.
Soyan is from Franklinville, returned to teach there, and has opened the doors of a family business for free unity events for kids. So when you heard that happened, what did you think?
I was very upset, and I'm sure the same reaction a lot of our community base had.
And Isaac, another Franklinville resident, says he was already trying to unite the community when the incident happened and was simply motivated to press on.
Now the race issue is brought to your attention, is brought to the forefront. And so now people are forced to deal with the race issue. And so before, people would ignore the issue, but now they're faced to deal with it.
And we heard a lot of that from everyone. Looking in the mirror for them was hard, but it was necessary to discuss and inspire change.
I think there's good people in this town. There's a lot of good people in this town that, you know, nobody wants that label on them, you know? Not this town anyway. This is a proud town.
I'm a black citizen in Franklinville with a voice. So I need to know, yes, change takes time, but how much time?
I've met so many people that I may not have run into at some point, and I think it's just because our barriers were broken down as much as theirs were.
The aftermath of the extensive negative coverage of the small town, it definitely encouraged discussion and debate, but did it unite? or just further anger residents who didn't ask for or desire the attention.
It needed to happen so people can see. People need to see what's going on, and you can correct it from that point, because there are issues, but as long as you work on it, we can change. 2020
was a year of clear vision, right? And there's a lot of prophetic things that we talk about with it. And I think that unless things come out into the light, they're not going to be addressed. And sometimes they're brought out into the light in very difficult ways. And unfortunately, that's what happened here.
I think racism's everywhere. I don't think it's the most racism place on earth. There's a lot of good that comes out of this community, and I think that's what we should focus on.
Ready or not, the need for change was made clear in this community, like many across the country, and at least initially, they seem to be taking on the challenge.
A part of what we're trying to do is drive home the message that Franklinville stands together. Regardless of what history has done to us, it is up to us to change our future.
You had spoken to Isaac and Beth and Rudy and Marlene. All these people just, it's amazing to see how true and honest they really are with their feelings towards our town.
And so the work continues. A well-known quote says that integrity is doing the right thing when nobody is watching. So after the cameras left, what specific steps have been taken in Franklinville? Now, when we first came to Franklinville, we spent the better part of a week hearing their stories, understanding their history, and realizing that their issues really aren't that different than many. They just were broadcast globally. So even though their challenges were out there for the whole world to see, the real work, the real change, that had to be done after all the cameras were gone.
There's some good people here. Good people that don't look like me. But there's also some really bad people here that think we don't belong here. And I've been here all my life. I just want change.
Have we had a reputation? Yeah, but what other towns haven't had a reputation? You always have that select group that's always gonna be negative or try and not assist with moving forward, but do you let that stop you? No.
Sad to say, but it did need to happen, because a lot of times people don't believe. You know, you can talk about it, you can go to meetings, you can say a lot of things, but until people witness it, eyewitness it, then they will come on board.
Communities trying to be better are almost like the stages of grieving. They first had to acknowledge the problem, and perhaps what's now referred to as the incident highlighted that process.
I think that it was important in helping us as a community move forward.
And if we keep ignoring the things that have always got us here, we'll always be like the past. And so it's up to us to try to create a better future. And to do that, we gotta stand together.
So it seems like the self-awareness has begun and led to the next step, communication.
I mean, we do need more unity. We have to be more diverse. I agree. In our local government, we have to be more diverse in our schools, and also the businesses in our community.
I want to see more black and brown people in Franklin Township on the board, talking to the chiefs, talking to the mayors, being a part of everything they do in Franklin Township, just not when something bad happens.
And with awareness and communication underway, they say they moved to action.
We've gotten a committee together. They meet monthly. They're the ones that are driving everything that's going to happen from this point forward. They're setting up events, different kind of things, and we as a committee are going to take their input to make any kind of changes.
It's a learning experience. Let's take it, move, learn from it. How do we better ourselves? How do we move forward?
Going into it, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this was going to just be a, bash the police session, bash the township session, or were people genuine in, hey, let's make a difference. And I'm gonna tell you this, I've been to all the meetings, and every one of them they get better and better and better. There's no, we don't mull over the things of the past. We're completely going 100% forward.
The Franklin Township Unity Advisory Committee was appointed by Mayor Bruno, but he says that the people on the committee, which he is not, residents, town officials, clergy, police of all ages, races, religions, you name it, they're driving the agenda.
You want to make a change.
You have to get involved.
That's right. You have to be part of that change.
Now I realize I built strong and organic relationships with people I probably wouldn't have built before.
Now, to be clear, with deep historic issues in this community, and any community, there are no happily ever after easy fixes.
We didn't please everybody. There's some people that are still not happy with the way we're trying to progress things, but we're doing what we feel is right for the township, you know, to try to heal everyone.
But they say that the goal was to get started and continue to include as many voices as possible as they move forward.
We very much so would like the community to see and be able to give us input so that we can do a better job with our work.
I'm sure a lot of things could have been avoided, but now moving forward, it's a learning experience. How do we send a positive message, and how do we better the community even more?
So they're talking, they're meeting, but to truly have an impact, you have to be able to answer a question for the larger community. What are you actually doing?
Franklinville is very left, very right, and so I want us to be together. And so I launched a hashtag movement, hashtag Franklinville Stands Together.
There are a lot of different ideas, but as the relationships develop, so do solutions.
A black church that really hasn't worked so much with this white church, but as we've started talking together, we do a lot of the same things in the community. So for instance, at Christmas time, Shirley calls us up and says, I have a whole lot of extra toys. Can you use them at your church? That wouldn't have happened 6 months ago because we didn't know each other.
My involvement was whatever I can do to help you, give back, I will be more than happy to do and give back to our community.
Since we last left town, they've organized food drives, interfaith services, unity events for the children, and partnerships with the police.
It's drawn in our police to recognize how they can make more efforts to get out there and be seen as more than perhaps what they were portrayed 6 months ago.
I'm very proud to say that I'm friends with these people now. We may have been acquaintances at one point, but I'm proud to say that we're friends now. And you know, they can call me any time of day or night, and I do the same with them.
They've tried to have at least one event planned monthly because at the end of the day, it's much harder to dehumanize and dislike somebody you actually know.
I'd go to school, I'd be the only one who looked like me. And so I faced this all through high school. I'm in college now and I'm still kind of facing it. And so the problems that we're facing today are problems I can relate to. I'm not afraid of them, and we're attacking it.
For 6 months during COVID, when getting together has been difficult, it's been wonderful to see the energy, the creativity, and just concern and dedication to doing this.
Now, they're admittedly small steps on a long journey, but they are steps nonetheless.
We have to unite. We have to come together. We have enough people in our community that if we all work together, we will make the change, and I do see change.
Full disclosure, it's not that hard to find a small group of people to say that things are improving. But if you really want to make change, you have to get buy-in from more residents. So is the work that they're doing here actually making a difference?
A line of 10 officers here that we prayed over. And again, showing to our community that we're supporting all of this, not one side or the other, but all of us working together. And I think that that is just huge progress.
I mean, I can't say if they stopped racial profiling. I don't know. I don't know if they're treating our children different in Delsey Regional. I don't know.
Individuals can actually pick up the phone and call Brian. Pick up the phone and call me. We are listening. we're listening and we're doing whatever we can to help.
Among the people that we spoke to, both on and off camera, frankly, it was a mixed bag. Honestly, it makes sense that those who are on the Unity Committee or have attended the meetings, they think that things are improving.
I know the committee members are looking forward to progress.
So if you haven't came to the meeting and you only griped and complained about your past experiences, what have you really done?
But there's still work to be done to get the message of change out to a larger audience and make them feel involved in the process.
Certainly not me, a community activist, the person that planned the march, protest in June in response to what happened here. So I would have thought that someone would have reached out to me to unify Franklinville or to at least be a part.
But here's the thing, even passionate disagreement can represent progress because it means that perhaps the quiet rumblings of the past are now on full display.
There are difficult issues that we still need to address. We're acknowledging that, and we'll move forward on it.
And what I did hear from everyone is that nobody is ready to throw in the towel and accept the division. They may disagree on how you fix it, but what does appear to be new is that most truly want to fix it.
There's a lot of good people all over. You just got to weed out the bad ones.
Experienced a very bad situation that we talked about before, and I feel like the time was right. I mean, the people were upset by what happened. I mean, I was upset by what happened. A lot of people were upset, and I think the timing was right to start that as soon as we did.
Franklinville may have been one of the first and highest profile conflicts, but they were far from the last. And with so many similar communities watching, up next, what are their thoughts on how far they've come? So they said that they wanted to make a difference, maybe even be an example for other communities trying to do the same. So let's give them one last chance to explain both the progress and the process in their own words.
And I think it would be much, much better in a year because, as he said, people will get to know everybody. We'll know the strong points. We'll know what we can do. We can make change. And people are willing to make change if you address them and let them know what your needs are. But we have to do that.
I hope that when we talk again in a year or in 6 months, the relationships will have grown so much that the difficult conversations won't have to be prompted. They'll just happen.
One person can make a difference. And I'm determined, like, I may not be here to see it in Franklinville, but somebody that looks like me will know that Beverly was here. Ms. Merritt made a difference.
Doesn't matter what color you are. If you need help, you need help. If you're dwelling in that, then you don't have time for all the rest.
It's tough to project where we're going to be, 10 years from now. I don't know where we're going to be 10 hours from now, but I would hope that seeing the positivity in this group of people specifically, that it's contagious and it's spreading more and more and more.
I'm a man about change. If you want to change, I'm here. Let's do it now.
I think our community is working to just be positive and move forward.
Never judge a book by its cover. One story don't make a town. There's still a lot of good people in this town. One incident doesn't define Franklin Township. Never will.
So we've been focusing on Franklinville, but honestly, the lessons learned here are an example for other communities dealing with the same unfortunate division. There's still work to be done, but they're stepping up, having the difficult conversations and committing to progress. As always, on behalf of Bill Rohr behind the camera and everyone who helped work on this special, I'm Bill Anderson, and thanks so much for watching.